Hello viewers, మనం TGPSC general essay discuss చేస్తున్నాం. In that context, already we have seen few essays under challenges, social issues and social problems లో ఒక రెండు essays చూసాము. తర్వాత ఎకనామిక్ గ్రోత్ అండ్ జస్టిస్లో ఒక రెండు మోడల్ ఎస్సేస్ చూసాము. దీనిలో మనం డైనమిక్స్ ఆఫ్ ఇండియన్ పాలిటిక్స్లో ముందు సెషన్లో ఒక టాపిక్ చూసాము. ఈ సెషన్లో మనం సెకండ్ మోడల్ ఎస్సే అండర్ డైనమిక్స్ ఆఫ్ ఇండియన్ పాలిటిక్స్లో సెకండ్ మోడల్ ఎస్సే చూస్తున్నాం. సో ఫస్ట్ మోడల్ ఎస్సేలో మనం వీ హ్యావ్ ట్రైడ్ టు అండర్స్టాండ్ ద రైజ్ ఆఫ్ కోalition గవర్నమెంట్స్ అండ్ హౌ దే ఆర్ ఇంపాక్టింగ్ ద సెంటర్ స్టేట్ రిలేషన్స్ ఇన్ ద ఓవరాల్ కాంటెక్స్ట్ ఆఫ్ ఇండియన్ ఫెడరలిజం అనే కాన్సెప్ట్ చూసాము. ఈ సెషన్లో మనం ఓవరాల్ డైనమిక్స్ ఆఫ్ ఇండియన్ పాలిటిక్స్లో ఒక సెకండ్ ఆస్పెక్ట్ చూద్దాం. అది strengthening Indian democracy requires a comprehensive overhaul of electoral politics and stricter measures to tackle electoral malpractices. Examine and అడిగాడు. సో ఆ కాంటెక్స్లో ట్రై టు అండర్స్టాండ్ అసలు ఇండియన్ డెమోక్రసీ స్ట్రాంగ్ అవ్వాలి అంటే టు స్ట్రెంగ్థెన్ దిస్ ఇండియన్ డెమోక్రసీ we need to overhaul electoral practices. Question చూడండి. To strengthen Indian democracy requires comprehensive overhaul of electoral practices and electoral politics and stricter measures to tackle electoral malpractices. సో ఈ ఎస్సే బేసికల్గా టూ ఇష్యూస్ ఓవరాల్ కాంటెక్స్ట్ ఆఫ్ ఎలక్టోరల్ రిఫార్మ్స్ కాంటెక్స్ట్లో మనం అర్థం చేసుకోవడానికి ట్రై చేస్తాం. ఇఫ్ యూ రియలీ వాంట్ టు స్ట్రెంగ్థెన్ ఇండియన్ డెమోక్రసీ దెన్ వీ నీడ్ టు స్టార్ట్ విత్ స్ట్రెంగ్థెనింగ్ ద ఎలక్టోరల్ పాలిటిక్స్ అండ్ ఓవర్హాలింగ్ రిఫార్మింగ్ ఎలక్టోరల్ పాలిటిక్స్ ఇన్ ఇండియా అండ్ దెన్ అట్ ద సేమ్ టైమ్ యూ నీడ్ టు address these electoral malpractices. అసలు electoral malpractices అంటే ఏంటి, how to address these electoral malpractices so that it eventually helps strengthen the Indian democracy. So in that context, basically this question is being asked from the concept of electoral reforms. Electoral reforms అనే కాంటెక్స్లో మనం అర్థం చేసుకుంటున్నాం. ఎలక్టోరల్ రిఫార్మ్స్ అంటే ఏంటి, ఆ ఎలక్టోరల్ రిఫార్మ్స్కి ఇండియన్ డెమోక్రసీకి రిలేషన్ ఏంటి, ఇఫ్ యూ రియలీ వాంట్ టు స్ట్రెంగ్థెన్ దిస్ ఇండియన్ డెమోక్రసీ హౌ టు వర్క్ టువర్డ్స్ రిఫార్మింగ్ దీస్ ఎలక్టోరల్ మాల్ ప్రాక్టీసెస్ అండ్ అడ్రస్సింగ్ ఆర్ ది ఇష్యూ ఆఫ్ ఎలక్టోరల్ మాల్ ప్రాక్టీసెస్ని అడ్రస్ చేస్తే దెన్ ఇండియన్ డెమోక్రసీ అనేది స్ట్రెంగ్థెన్ అవుతుంది అనే కాంటెక్స్లో మనం అర్థం చేసుకుంటున్నాం. సో ఈ కాంటెక్స్లో let me read the question again. Strengthening Indian democracy requires a comprehensive overhaul of electoral politics and stricter measures to tackle electoral malpractices. Examine అన్నాడు. సో ఆ కాంటెక్స్లో we'll see the introduction, అసలు డెమోక్రసీకి బేసిస్ ఏంటి అనేది కొంచెం ఇనిషియల్గా మాట్లాడండి. ఇండియన్ డెమోక్రసీ ఆఫెన్ డిస్క్రైబ్డ్ యాజ్ ది లార్జెస్ట్ ఇన్ ద వరల్డ్ ఈజ్ బిల్ట్ అపాన్ ది ఫౌండేషన్ ఆఫ్ ఫ్రీ అండ్ ఫెయిర్ ఎలక్షన్స్. సో క్వశ్చన్లో మనకి ఇండియన్ డెమోక్రసీ స్ట్రెంగ్తన్ అవ్వాలి అంటే ఎలక్టోరల్ ప్రాక్టీసెస్ని రిఫార్మ్ చేయాలి, ఓవర్హాల్ చేయాలి. అట్ ది సేమ్ టైం ఎలక్టోరల్ మాల్ ప్రాక్టీసెస్ని వీకెన్ చేయాలి. when you weaken this electoral malpractices and reform these electoral politics and practices, then it will strengthen democracy అన్నాడు. సో ఫస్ట్ ఆఫ్ ఆల్ మీరు ఇంట్రొడక్షన్లో అసలు డెమోక్రసీస్కి ఎలక్టోరల్ ప్రాక్టీసెస్కి రిలేషన్ ఎక్కడొచ్చింది, ఎందుకు వచ్చింది అనేది ఫస్ట్ మెన్షన్ చేయాలి. సో ఇండియన్ డెమోక్రసీ ఆఫెన్ డిస్క్రైబ్డ్ యాజ్ ద లార్జెస్ట్ ఇన్ ద వరల్డ్ ఈజ్ బిల్ట్ అపాన్ ద ఫౌండేషన్ ఆఫ్ ఫ్రీ అండ్ ఫెయిర్ ఎలక్షన్. సో ఈ ఫ్రీ అండ్ ఫెయిర్ ఎలక్షన్స్ becomes the founding stone or foundation stone for your democracy. ఈ డెమోక్రసీ రియల్గా ఒక డెమోక్రసీ సక్సెస్ అవ్వాలి అన్న, స్ట్రెంగ్తెన్ అవ్వాలి అన్న, ఇట్ స్టార్ట్స్ విత్ యువర్ ఫ్రీ అండ్ ఫెయిర్ ఎలక్షన్స్. ఇఫ్ దే గో రాంగ్, యువర్ democracy cannot go right. if your elections, if there is no free and fair elections, if your elections is undermined, the process of election is undermined, then you can say that your democracy is also undermined. So this is the basis. Free and fair elections is the basis for your democracy. That is why if you really want to strengthen democracy, you need to start your work with strengthening free and fair elections or electoral practices ni strengthen cheyali. So our context lo just give a basis or basic understanding of that, and then you can use a quote. I have put in a quote by the Vice President of India, M. Venkaiah Naidu, once said, Indian democracy faces challenges due to overwhelming use of money power and attempts to entice voters with short-term benefits. Strengthening democracy requires not only reforms to the electoral system but also stricter measures to address the persistent malpractice. So, ఇది కొంచెం కోట్ చెప్పి ఓవరాల్ కాంటెక్స్ట్ చెప్పండి. సో దిస్ విల్ బీ ఇన్ యువర్ ఇంట్రొడక్షన్. దెన్ ఛాలెంజెస్ టు ఎలక్టోరల్ పాలిటిక్స్. అసలు ఎలక్టోరల్ పాలిటిక్స్లో మేజర్గా ఛాలెంజెస్ ఏంటి అనేది ఇఫ్ యూ కెన్ అండర్స్టాండ్ దాట్, దెన్ యూ విల్ ట్రై టు అండర్స్టాండ్, దెన్ యూ విల్ అండర్స్టాండ్ ఎలక్టోరల్ ప్రాసెస్ or electoral practices. Question lo, it is said that if you overhaul electoral practices, then it will lead to Indian strengthening of Indian democracy అన్నాడు. అసలు ఎలక్టోరల్ ప్రాక్టీసెస్లో పాలసీస్లో ఛాలెంజెస్ ఎక్కడ ఉన్నాయి, ఏం ఛాలెంజెస్ ఉన్నాయి, ఫస్ట్ అవి ఛాలెంజెస్ అర్థం చేసుకుంటే then you will understand how to address these challenges, eventually overhauling electoral process practices, eventually leading to your Indian democracy. So our context lo, let's try to see what are the different challenges that Indian democracy and electoral policies and practices are being faced in India. In that context, let's see the first challenge, money power and muzzle power. Earlier we are saying that money power and the muzzle power are one of the two major challenges to the electoral practices. Even today, you see how money power is basically playing role in the process of getting elected. It is said that number of crores is being used to get elected into a legislature or parliament. You need to spend hundreds of crores in regard to getting into parliament. So this money power is a major challenge in regard to electoral practices. How to address this money power, and this money power is transforming into huge election expenditure. Even though we have systems, we have model code of conduct describing or putting a limit on the election expenditure, it is not being followed in spirit. In letter, yes, they'll show that we are following that, but in spirit, no political party, no person who is getting elected is basically following this election expenditure limit. So they are misusing this election expenditure limit and using this money power to get elected. So when you have this, until you address this problem or the issue of money power and huge election expenditure, you will not really get good people into elections. There are so many good people who want to get elected and to serve the nation, but they'll not have the money power. They'll not spend as much as a person with money will spend. So that is the reason why they are unable to get into politics, and eventually this is undermining the process of democracy in India. So understand the power of money and how it is being used in the process of election. Overall, it is undermining the process of Indian democracy. In the same context, you can even talk about muzzle power. Earlier, it was very high, using muzzle power to cow down the opposition parties, opponents and other people who are trying to get into the election. So now it has come down to an extent, but still the use of muzzle power, you can see it is happening here and there. So these things, money power, muzzle power and election expenditure is one of the major and the single most important aspect in regard to challenge of electoral politics or electoral processes. Then you see criminalization of politics. You see ADR, Association for Democratic Reforms, has come out giving you the how many, around 50 and more than 50% of the people who are getting elected into state legislatures and the parliament have cases against them. So it is a case of criminals getting elected into parliament and state legislatures. This is also a major problem. How to, first we are trying to understand what are the major challenges in regard to electoral processes, then we will see solutions, measures to address these things in the next aspect. But let's understand what are the major issues. As per your AD, you need to, under this point, you need to talk about, see, in the essay, everyone will say points, but essay should have the combination of giving your opinion, saying something, and also substantiating that with your facts. You need to give facts, you need to give evidences, you need to give statistics, supporting your view, supporting your perspective. Only then you will be in a better position to understand, or only then you will be in a better position to get good marks. So you say criminalization of politics is one major issue in regard to electoral practices and processes, and then vote buying and freebies. It is an aspect of money power only, but the aspect of freebies, how different political parties, even in Telangana you see, whenever any election happens, all political parties will come out with saying that they will give you free electricity, free education. Earlier it was free engineering education, free transportation, loan waiver, like this. These are freebies. This is undermining again. How can state governments have a fiscal stability when they are going and giving these freebies to the people? They should not be made habituated to these kind of freebies. This is developing a bad culture, bad habit among the citizens. When you regularly give loan waivers, what happens? These people will never pay that back. This is leading to a development of new habit of not paying the loans. So by your freebies, you are undermining the fiscal situation of the state governments, central governments, by providing these freebies. You should win on your ability to govern better, but not on the ability to give freebies to the people. So this issue of freebies, vote buying, both in a way of giving freebies and also giving money, cash directly in regard to getting elected. 2,000, 3,000 are being given for every vote in regard to parliament election. So this is vote buying and culture of freebies. So this is the third aspect. Let's see the fourth, paid news and media manipulation. And paid news. Earlier, UPSC once asked that biased media is a real threat to Indian democracy. Understand this. Biased media is a real threat to Indian democracy. So understand the importance. Media is generally referred to as the fourth pillar of democracy. Legislature, executive, judiciary being the first three, biased media is the fourth pillar. In that context, RTA is the fifth pillar. So in that context, biased media is a real threat to Indian democracy. If media is not working or not fulfilling its responsibility, then eventually it may undermine the democracy. So in that context, you need to understand how having a strong, independent, resilient media is important for your democracy. So in that context, what is this paid news? What is this manipulation of media? So you see at the central government and the state government, or at the state level or at the central level, you see n number of media houses getting connected to different political parties. You can say that there are media houses like NDTV, etc., which are aligned to a political ideology. And there are also other media houses which are aligned to other political parties. In the state government also, you see number of media houses aligned to one political party. Some media houses, 𝗧𝗦𝗔𝗧 aligned to one, TV9 aligned to other. So you see different political or different media houses aligned to different political parties. Even in Telangana, you see different media houses aligning to different political parties. So this is an issue of media manipulation. What is paid news? Paid news is an aspect where media houses get money for the news that is being published, but they publish it as a report, not as a promotion. So taking money and promoting a leader, but under the guise of a news item, is a paid news. So this is also a major issue. Election Commission of India is looking into this, and recently, some time back, there were in Madhya Pradesh, one legislature was disqualified on the issue of paid news. Yes, it has to happen. There is an election expenditure limit on every individual candidate, but they are misusing this and they are promoting their news, their practices in the guise of a news report by paying the media houses. This is paid news, and which has to be curbed when media is biased, when it is not really fulfilling its responsibility, that is showing the truth to the people, bringing right awareness to the people, then it may eventually address the Indian democracy. So paid news and media manipulation is one major issue in regard to realizing the Indian democracy. Then we'll see the next issue. Electoral violence and intimidation is also major issue. In recent elections, 2024 elections, you have seen how in AP there were cases, not just in AP but across India. There are not, see, this violence and intimidation was very high some years back. But in recent times, there is a trend of decreasing this electoral violence and intimidation. But still, you happen to see these events occurring here and there, affecting the very process of free and fair elections. Elections should be free and fair. But because of this electoral violence and intimidation, it is affecting the process of free and fair elections. So in that context, you need to understand, even recent times AP, there was fightings, there were leaders who have hit the people in regard to elections in the process of casting their vote. So this issue has to be addressed. People has to be freely come out and openly vote in regard to their wishes. So this is a major issue. Booth capturing may not be as much as it was there in the past, but still EVMs are being broken. They are being controlled by certain people. So this is also there. In a small aspect, you can talk about that. Misuse of government machinery. You see, whenever elections happen, the parties, political parties, which are there in the power, uses the government machinery, the government officers, whether it is police, whether it is other government officials, they are misused in regard to promoting the interests of this political power. That is why you see instances of the police heads, the SPs being transferred or being suspended during this process of election by Election Commission of India, because it appears to be that they are favoring a certain political parties. So in that context, it's not only the misuse of the officials, but also other government machinery, the official buildings, official cars and other things being misused by a political party which is in the power. This is also an issue which is undermining the process of free and fair elections, overall undermining the process of democracy. So this is the sixth issue. And then, of course, first past the post system, there should be some kind of reforms, because even though political parties don't get majority, they happen to get elected and form the governments, even though certain political parties do get a substantial vote share, they don't get any representation in the government. So this is also an aspect of democracy where a political party getting a substantial vote share do not get any representation in the government. That should not be the case. If they are getting, say, 20% of vote share, 20-25% of vote share, then there should be some kind of representation, some kind of say in the process of decision making. So we need to think about how to address these problems. So this is also one issue. You get 20-25% of vote, but you don't get even 2-3 seats in the government. That is a big issue. So this 20% of the people who elected this government are being sidelined in the process of democracy. That should not be the case. So there is a need to look at reforming this first past the post system. So that is your other issue. And then ethnic, caste, religious polarization, basically identity politics. So you need to talk about how the political parties are polarizing people based on caste, based on religion, based on ethnic. In this aspect, we need to talk about how to address these problems of identity politics, how to address this problem of polarization of people based on region, based on religion, based on caste, based on race, etc. should be avoided in the process of democracy. So you need to talk about this problem of polarization and rise of identity politics. And then the eventual problem we have brought in model code of conduct, but really we need to think whether this model code of conduct is being strictly implemented by the Election Commission of India or not. In order to really see that Indian democracy flourishes, functions in a right way, you need to implement this model code of conduct. But really it is not happening. People, leaders go free even after violating model code of conduct. This is also a recurring issue in the process of election processes. So we need to address this problem of weak enforcement of model code of conduct. Then need for comprehensive electoral reform. So till now we have seen what are the different challenges in regard to elections, in regard to strengthening Indian democracy. Now we will see some of the reforms that are needed in regard to addressing the challenges that we have discussed till now. See, till now we have discussed what are the problems, what are the challenges undermining the electoral process overall, leading to weak democracy or undermining the Indian democracy. In that aspect, now we will see what are the solutions to the discussed challenges. So already we have said that money power, muscle power, expenditure is a problem. So how to address this money problem? Curbing money power in elections, transparency in political funding. So generally in this aspect, there is a solution given by 𝗬𝗎 in second ARC also has given these suggestions. 𝗬𝗎 has also given solutions in regard to this. So in that aspect, you need to understand a concept of state funding of elections. So state funding and transparency in funding. In regard to this transparency of funding, recently Supreme Court has said that electoral bonds is not right, it's null and void, so it has banned these things. So in that context, actually it was brought with an intention to promote transparency in funding, but it was being misused, so Supreme Court struck it down. So in that context, you need to talk about how to bring transparency in political funding, which can curb this money power in the election. So you need to talk about that. And then stricter enforcement of spending limit, how to strictly enforce these spending limits. Basically, we will try to strengthen the Election Commission of India. When you strengthen the Election Commission of India and give it enough powers by giving legal backing to it, maybe then it may lead to stricter enforcement of spending limits. So you need to talk about that. And then decriminalization of politics. Already we have seen criminalization of politics is a major issue. How to What is the solution? Decriminalize. How to decriminalize? Bring fast track courts, bring special laws. Already Supreme Court has earlier struck down one of the sections of Representation of People's Act and ensured decriminalization of politics. Also in that process, we can still work towards bringing fast track courts to weed out the criminals from the politics. So decriminalization of politics, regulating vote buying and freebies. See, you need to basically promote awareness among the people. Through bringing awareness only, we can address this problem of regulating vote buying and culture of freebies. So this is one solution. Tackling fake news and paid news. Stricter actions need to be taken against these media houses which are getting involved in promoting fake news. And this is about social media. You need to have social media regulations to address the problem of fake news. And at the same time, you also need to ensure stricter actions are taken against media houses to address the problem of paid news. So then addressing electoral violence and intimidation by strengthening police systems and other things. And then preventing misuse of government machinery. All this can happen only when you have strengthening. All this can happen by strengthening model code of conduct. When you strengthen this model code of conduct by giving it a legal backing and strengthening Election Commission of India, only these two things can eventually address all the problems that are being faced. Strengthening election institutions. So basically, role of Election Commission. Here are some of reforms measures to strengthen election. So we can also discuss what you can do in regard to strengthening Election Commission. Give it independence, institutional autonomy. It should have independence in regard to financial independence, and then you need to talk about fixed tenure, and also the process of selecting the Chief Election Commission and other election commissioners has to be more strengthened. Recently, you have seen during 2024 election, suddenly election commissioner resigns, and then next day central government brings in an election commissioner. So this kind of things should not be there. There should be a strong process by bringing a Supreme Court judge, opposition leader, and the minister. So when you have this thing, then only we can feel confidence in the process of these electing Election Commission of India. So you need to talk about that. Financial independence, then strengthening enforcement powers, that is giving more powers and teeth to the Election Commission of India, that is also you need to talk. And then regulating social media, capacity building of the staff of Election Commission of India, overall legal reforms. So these are some of the things that you can talk about in the process of electoral reform. So in this context, you can use one quote by T.N. Session in the conclusion. He said, reforms are not meant to be cosmetic. They must be meaningful and impactful. So you can talk about T.N. Session and his role in the process of strengthening model code of conduct, bringing reforms in the process of election. So you need to bring this T.N. Session and his activities also somewhere in the process of talking about election reforms. So we have seen till now how Indian democracy basically depends on free and fair elections. If you really want to strengthen Indian democracy, you need to start with working about electoral reforming, overhauling electoral practices, electoral policies. So students, this is a second topic under the overall issue of politics, dynamics of Indian politics. In this, we have seen first topic, that is coalition governments, rise of coalition government. This is the second topic about electoral reforms. In the earlier session, we also have discussed what are the other possible areas where a question can be asked under this. You can expect a question on regional parties. You can expect a question on social media and its impact on Indian politics. You can expect a question on the role of governor. You can expect a question on the role of speaker. So these are some of the topics which you can expect a question under this topic. So in this topic, understand this issue and try to understand the overall issue, and these are some of the examples. So I hope you understood these topics. Thank you.